but
Yeah.
and I know you've presented at several of my Hawaii conferences.
Yeah.
I think 2005, 2006, we met at some of those. So I'm very glad to be able to kind of like present you to my audience. Now, a lot of people, or some people in my audience, don't know about you. So, I mean, how did you get involved in this field of exopolitics?
What's really interesting is that as a child, I had all kinds of experiences, and to me, it was just natural. Of course, UFOs exist. We're raised in the high desert, and we would sleep outside at night and watch the ships, and we had encounters, and it had both some weird ones and some very positive ones. Most of them were very positive, and the positive ETs were kind of taking care of the negative ones. But and my dad, his family went back to Roswell, and my grandmother was the school teacher in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and the sheriffs, the first responders, actually came to her and told her the story, and they were white as a sheet. She said they couldn't even hold a cup of coffee, and they told her the whole story. So we seem to have this weird thing where all this information keeps coming to us, and we're part of it, and it's all unfolding. But at 5 years old, I was actually dying. I was in the hospital dying, and a being all dressed in blue came to me. And several times she came to me because they called my parents several times and told them I probably wasn't going to make it through the night. And then later on, I found out it was Mary, actually Mother Mary, who's very involved in the health and well-being of the children. And I'm not, a little disclaimer, I'm not Catholic, I'm not religious, I'm more spiritual. So she's not Catholic either. So, it's important to realize that this goes far beyond that. But I continued to have experiences in the high desert, and I've always had ongoing conversations. I would go up to these huge granite boulders and sit on them and have conversations, and they'd explain to me what was going on in my life and why people would think one thing and say something else and do something else, and it was really confusing me. And they explained to me past life things going on with my mom and why she acted the way she did. So it helped me depersonalize it and get through life. So when I was very young, I was 5 years old, I was in the hospital and I was dying of bronchial pneumonia, and the doctors kept telling my parents I probably wasn't going to make it through the night. And a woman in blue kept coming to me, and she would talk to me and stroke my head, and then it was I'd be better. I'd get through the night, and then the last night she appeared to me. She gave me a substance that was a white. It was like the consistency of ice cream, but it wasn't. It wasn't cold. And she gave it to me in this little like glass bowl or whatever, and I ate it, and I wasn't sick after that. I didn't miss a day of school or anything, and I'm pretty sure I know what that is. And it's crystallized oxygen is what it is, and there are scientists that have actually created that here right now. But there's a lot more to that story. That's a whole nother show. But
But as far as Mother Mary is concerned, where does she fit into this whole kind of ET
yeah,
phenomenon?
well, I found out it was Mother Mary later, and a little disclaimer: I'm not Catholic. I'm a very spiritual person, but not religious. And Mary actually goes back to ancient Lyra. She had the genetics from ancient Lyra, which the Pleiadians were offshoots of the ancient Lyrians. So she's connected through the Pleiades and Lyra, and she had very high genetics, which was necessary actually to create the vehicle for Jesus to come in. So, that's a really interesting story, because basically what happened is Gabriel appears to Joseph and he said, Mary's pregnant with child. I'm not going to marry her. This isn't my kid. And he says, this is God's child, or our child, your womb is your own. And he said, yes, sir. And then it went on from there. So the big question we have to ask, was Gabriel terrestrial? He wasn't. He was extraterrestrial. He was on another, coming from a higher frequency. And so the vehicle of Jesus was actually created by the merge of the ancient Lyrian genetics, which were very high genetics, and higher dimensional genetics. So the soul of Jesus could actually come in to the body because his soul force was too strong. He came in from the seventh dimension. His actual name was Yeshua ben Joseph, or Yeshua born of Joseph. And so he came in and incarnated. And I've talked about it before, when they said he laid his life down, he actually laid his life down from the seventh dimension, which is the plane of bliss. So he was done. He'd already transcended any need for physical reality or any of that. And then
right. So with the whole Immaculate Conception thing, then that meant that Mother Mary, was a human Lyran hybrid, and because of that high vibration, that she was able to create a vessel, a body for Jesus, bringing with him a very high energy into this human realm. Is that essentially what was going on?
Yeah, and he was the example of what we can all do. He was the exemplar Christ, you might say. Mm-hmm. And, if you can say Christ consciousness or Buddha consciousness or Kuan Yin consciousness or Mary, it doesn't matter. It's all a level of consciousness. And so we need to stop separating, and it's kind of sad because a lot of times when you run into Christians, they say, that's the devil, or that's this, or that's that, and I said, well, God's got a big family, and it's multidimensional, and even Jesus said there's, many houses, many mansions in my Father's houses, or whatever. But anyway, it's a much bigger story than we've been told, and it's a multi-dimensional story, and it's time to get the rest of the picture out, the rest of the story out. But
so when you say multi-dimensional, what do you mean by that? Are we talking different realms of existence? Are we talking about different densities from which extraterrestrials come and go?
Yeah, whole civilizations are living in these dimensions, and some people call them densities. Everybody has a different word, but it's all about frequency, and they're coming from higher frequencies. The highest frequency of creator, you might say it, or the plane of bliss, it's the God realm, whatever you want to call it, is just pure unconditional love and joy and bliss. There's no words to explain it. It's an experience. I can't do it justice, but I've had near-death experiences after that. I had a drowning where I went blasted into this light realm, and the next thing you know, I was just totally blissed out, and I was unique yet one. So I was one. I still had my identity, but I was also one with a greater identity, a greater consciousness and energy that was surrounding me, and I had a conversation with it. So what happened with me and my experiences is I'm kind of going from the top down, where a lot of people are going from the bottom up, and so I'm coming from the highest dimensions, all the way. I've been up to the 13th dimension and on down, and so it's really hard to explain, because I know, like you've experienced, everybody has reference points, and everybody's coming from those reference points, and they're coming from their own experiences, and so some of this we're talking about is so far beyond people's reference points and experiences that it's hard to validate unless you've been there, unless you've died and come back or things like that. And again, what happens when you cross over is determined by your consciousness, and your frequency, your vibration as to where you go. So people are going to have different experiences, and the problem is when that person tries to say this is how it is, because that's how it was for them, But there's
so
more.
when you say you come from the 13th dimension, I mean your soul, we're talking the soul here, right? I mean the physical body incarnated as normally would with the human, but your soul came from one of those dimensions. So how would you differentiate that from, say, a normal person in terms of going through the reincarnational cycle?
Well, I didn't come from the 13th dimension after my near-death experience, where I went to the 7th dimension. I started being contacted by these other beings, and so it was a merge. But you start realizing that it's hard to explain. One of our traps is identity. And so we identify with this body and this personality and our experiences here in the world. And that's a very, very limited reality as to who we are, because we're actually multidimensional beings existing on a vibrational continuum. So we are a body and a personality, and we also have our multidimensional aspects, which are, everybody has different names for them. So you have your physical body, your mental body, your emotional body, your astral body, you have your etheric body, or Christ's body, you have your I am and your God self and cosmic. There's all these levels, and different cultures have different names for these levels. And when you're aware of all these levels, your identity doesn't really matter anymore. And to get there, you're probably going to have a breakdown. You're going to have a full-on identity crisis. You're going to go, who am I? What is this all about? And eventually some huge golden being will show up and say, it's all you. Just release it. Let go of your need for identity.
Okay. All right, so you've had a lot of these experiences with high dimensional beings throughout your life, Mother Mary, near-death experience. When or how did you first have a contact with someone that we would identify with or call an extraterrestrial? Was it? I mean, you also talked about seeing UFO craft. So, did you actually have a physical encounter with an extraterrestrial at some point?
Well, during childhood, we had some things happen, my brother and we talked about it later, and we had some little grays like come through the wall, and I had constant contact with beings that, I just saw them as beautiful angelic type beings, and turned out to be Pleiadians. I didn't know who they were because I really didn't have anybody to teach me who they were, or I had no reference points. And so I've had that contact all my life, but after the near-death experience, I really started to understand, what that was about. And that's been probably a 36, 7 year experience where I've studied with lamas and yogis and elders from almost every nation to understand their beliefs and their systems and how they all integrate.
Can you, just explain a little bit about that Pleiadian experience or that contact? I mean, how did that unfold? How did you know they were Pleiadians and so forth?
Well, they didn't tell me they're Pleiadians until I figured it out. So it's kind of what they do there. Once you figure it out, they'll tell you, but they don't want to trespass on your free will and self-determination and things like that. But once you start to figure things out and you ask the right questions, they'll tell you. And that's the way I found out, is I started getting bits and pieces and putting it all together, and then I started figuring out who was who. And then they would elaborate on that, and they would show me my past life in the Pleiades and what I did, and they showed me in the Orion system. I was there too, part of the Orion Council of Light, and there's different groups in the Orion system. It's really gotten a bad rap, but there's the Gray Alliance, the Gray Reptilian Alliance, and they were warring all throughout Orion, and then the Pleiadians, or the ancient Lyrians, actually colonized the Orion system, the Pleiades system, and the Hades system. And then they came to Earth, Mars, and Maldek, or Malona, depending what name you want to give it, which blew up, and it's our asteroid belt right now. But that's our real history. And they started explaining this to me, and it really makes sense because we have a missing planet, where the asteroid belt is now. And so there's a lot of information they showed me, and then when I connected with Melia, which was with the Orion Council of Light, she's a 6-dimensional being, just pure energy, and I ended up on like a plasma craft that was pure golden energy. I didn't see any moving parts there. It was different. It was but next thing you know, I appeared, and that story's been told quite a bit. I was actually in the bathtub meditating. This big beam hit me in the chest, and it pulled me up on the ship. And the next thing, and 3 gold balls came down the beam and hit me in the chest before they took me on the ship. But the balls that they hit me with was the restoration of all my memories in the Pleiades and Orion and all these other systems, and who I was and what I did, and it was quite interesting. It was quite a shock.
So you were having a bath and you were pulled out of the bathtub onto a craft. So just explain, what exactly happened?
Well, I was taking a bath, and this gold beam came through the wall and hit me in the chest. And then 3 gold balls of energy came down that beam, and then the next thing you know, they pulled me up on a craft, and it was with Melia, which is with the Orion Council of Light. And I had a conversation with her, And I told her I wanted proof that this is a real event. This isn't just overactive imagination. And for the record, I don't do drugs. I don't drink. Nothing. So I'm as clean as you can get. But the experience was basically what she said was, you have to go back. And she said, you have all the proof you need. And I said, why? And she said, because you can't stay here, because if you stay here very long, you won't be able to function back on Earth. And I understand it was about frequency. And so she put me back into my body, and I got up and I had a big burn mark in the middle of my chest. And I took photographs of it, and I had a doctor look at it. And, he said it looked like a radiation burn, but it was really bizarre because it was just my body's reaction to the higher frequency, the higher energy. And it morphed into like a triangle and then a heart, and then this kind of gold crust came over it, and it just went away. And totally painless. It wasn't, they asked me, are you experiencing any pain? Are you having any heart trauma? I said, no, I felt great. So it was an interesting experience.
Right. So, you've had those kinds of experiences, and so you've stayed in touch with Malia, and I guess there's probably other groups, Pleiadians and so forth over the years. And so how do you stay in touch? How do you get your information from them?
It's telepathic. It's just straight up. They're always around me, and they're always communicating. And I feel it in my body. I have body signals that go off. I don't know which one's communicating. Like my left side is used the feminine energies coming in, and the right side are more masculine or more higher dimensional. Like if you get into the feline energies, the lion beings, and the Orion energies, and the Andromedan energies, the real strong energies. So I'll feel them as male, but they may not be male. They appear as male because they're coming to you objectively, and you have to be subjected to them to feel them, to experience them. So they feel male, but they're not.
Great. So you've been getting a lot of information over the years, and I know you have your ranch up there at Mount Adams, and very important, for anyone that does any kind of channeling, is to stay in a very high vibration. And of course, you live on a ranch in a remote area, just by that Mount Adams. So how important is Mount Adams and the frequency there for you to be able to do the things you do, maintain your communications with different ET groups? And I know you host a lot of people that want to see the lights and have those things that you do.
Yeah, we've been doing that for 36 years here, and we've had conferences and workshops and things of that nature. And we teach the foundational things that people need, like safeguards for pure channeling, how to heal unseen negative influences, how to make sure you're in contact with the higher dimensional beings, and how to remove those that aren't, So without that foundation that they can come in, and if you have old wounds and traumas you haven't dealt with, those are chinks in your armor, and they'll find those chinks and use them against you later. And the dark side is very good at what it does. It knows you better than you know yourself, and so it'll find inroads, whatever you have extreme dislikes for, if you have victim patterns, if you know, it knows how to use those inroads and create division and chaos. And that's happening a lot, you know, in the spiritual and UFO community. They don't have the foundation or the training to understand these influences and how they can come in and derail your work, or you know, create division and chaos. And because you know, there's serpent beings that are very nasty. There's the djinn, there's the tall grays, reptilians, we all know about them. They're all looking for a pathway in. And so we have to learn how to shield up and to clear these negative influences. And they just keep working on you until they find that chink in your armor and get in. And it's really important that people, you know, the best thing to do is just focus on universal law or universal principles, you know, like universal peace, brother, sister love, you know, individual freedom and prosperity for everybody, the basics, you know, be in service, and just monitor yourself and say, am I stepping out of love? You know, am I stepping out of the foundation or the fundamentals? And that's when you'll know you're going astray and they found the chink in your armor or whatever. And even defending yourself, you know, only the ego needs defense. You know, you don't need to defend yourself in all this stuff going on, you know, because everybody's gonna have their truth and project and blame, and it's a real mess. So you gotta just find that center and stay in it.
Yeah, well, I think for many of us that have been leading a kind of spirit or doing any kind of spiritual practice for years, we tend to gravitate towards kind of like areas with a high vibration, typically rural areas. And of course, in your case, you've got that wonderful Mount Adams retreat. And I know when I went up there with Angelica, that was back in 2006. I mean, you could feel, you know, the high vibrations there. You know, it just really raised the vibrations. So I think that would make it so much easier to have these kinds of quality communications and to prevent interference by these negative ET groups.
Yeah, when I went to that conference, I went on a dolphin swim, and Angelica was heading that, and Celeste was also part of that group. And I just went to Kona again and swam with the dolphins and the manta rays and the whales and everything. So, and it brought back those memories. But we were on a boat and we passed over this area, and the whole bottom of the ocean lit up. I mean, it was bright, and some of the people actually got ill. It was too much energy for them to handle, and so it was kind of, you know, I always remember that fondly, that experience, and going out on those dolphin swims. But yeah, give a big hug to Angelica. She's an angel. I love her energy, and I love it when people like that come up to the ranch, and the people that are really working on holding the frequency and things. This is like a candy store for them. They come up here and they see everything. They see the nature spirits, you know, Bigfoot comes cruising through now and then. They see the Pleiadians, the higher dimensional beings pop in and out. You know, they see people morphing in and out, and the ships come on a regular basis. Just saw one last night, a big one came right over the house. We had one little clear spot in the sky, and this big ship came right through. But I think it's odd that this has been going on for some 36 years now, and we're still focused on this little fuzzy tic tac, and I just go, seriously, guys. I go, come on. I mean, you've brought out the secret space fleet and Solar Warden and all these other things, and now they're focusing on this little fuzzy tic tac, and they're saying, well, this is real because pilots saw it. And I said, well, those pilots should be flying the other stuff, and then that we have. So there, I mean, that's even the tip of the iceberg, the secret space force and all that, or everybody has different names for those groups, but I mean, there's so many dimensions beyond that. And you've got the fifth, sixth, seventh dimensional beings coming in right now, and most people won't even experience the fifth or fifth on up dimensional beings. They'll see things in the fourth and the third, and that's their own reality. But there's a much bigger story, a much more powerful story going on, and all that is present in on the earth right now. All the way to the source itself is present in on the earth right now. And we just went through a huge shift from January 1st to the 7th, where there was so much energy that came in, and you can monitor this. People go, that's woo-woo, and I go, well, go to the Solar Observatory, check it out. The Cosmic Ray Index went off the scale. They actually warned people you're going to start having, heart attacks and seizures, and like the psychiatric realm is going to have, those people are going to start losing it, and that's what these events do. So whenever we have a major solar flare or a major influx of energy like that, you're going to see a lot of change, a lot of chaos. Everybody's going to go into process. Your physical body's going to go through changes as well. It's going through DNA upgrades, and that's what we're going through. And a lot of people I know that are very sensitive and awake right now have just been laid out by these energies, and they're feeling everything coming up. They're feeling the whole collective consciousness and the processes, and they're feeling, and their body's having to adjust to these new energies as well. So it's been rough, for a lot of people right now to hang in there. But I tell people, hang in there. You don't have to leave, because where you want to go is coming here.
There's been a lot of talk about the photon belt for years. I remember there was a Dr. Neil Huntley years ago. He talked about the photon belt, and it actually does exist, that there is this kind of band of incredibly intense light. And people have talked about our solar system entering it, but it looks like now we've entered into a very solid part of it. Like, I think for the last, people have been talking about it for a decade now, that maybe we're out of edge. Now we seem to be right in the midst of it.
Yeah, we are.
The sun is like very active at the moment, and we are really in the midst of a lot of intense energies all over the planet right now.
Yeah, and also too, the Schumann resonance is just off. It's spiking. It's off the scale, and it's had some of the most huge spikes right around Christmas every year, which is kind of interesting. And so there's natural cycles that happen, and the higher dimensional beings work along with those natural cycles. And when people are most open to experiencing this higher consciousness and energy, and with that energy present in is universal law, So you're going to see our whole legal system get turned upside down. You know, you're going to see the political system get turned upside down. You're going to see the corruption in the business and religious institutions. All of them is all going to come to the surface, and that's part of the process. And so, you know, we have to learn to stay centered through the chaos. That's part of the healing. The chaos we're experiencing now is just everything coming up to the surface, and we need to be examples to others and help others get through this process, because it's going to be an intense one.
Yeah, so what are your sources telling you about what's happening in space? I mean, I've been hearing a lot about some fleet that's
Yeah.
arrived recently that's parked around Ganymede and Jupiter. Do you know anything about that you can share?
Well, they told us there was 500 ships, very large ships coming in. And they also told us that there was two that were going to be very active here on the Earth. They're going to make their presence known, and as part of the disclosure, and to help out with the disclosure. And they're also doing work as well. And they're doing a lot of work on the other dimensions and working with us through frequencies and in our dream states and things like that to help clean up the planet. So there's this huge planetary liberation process going on. And, you know, it's going to be 2 steps forward, 1 back, you know, and people say, I thought you said this was going to happen. And I said, you know, even the higher beings underestimated the amount of infiltration and the denial and the resistance to the awakening healing process. You know, they thought we'd just go for it, you know, once we knew what was available. But there's still extreme resistance, and it's, you know, it's kind of a weird analogy. It's like whack-a-mole. You know, they clean everything out, and then all of a sudden they surface again. They go, I thought those guys were gone, back again. And so that's been happening with, you know, cleaning out the cabal and the reptilian and gray energies and that alliance. You know, they think they have it all cleaned up, and all of a sudden it pops up again. And the latest one is this. It's a reptilian gray hybrid, and it's attached to AI, and they're I don't think we can fix this. We need help from the higher dimensions to fix this, because their technologies are so far superior, and they can go and ferret this out and clean it up. But I think it's so infiltrated and it's so advanced that we're probably going to need some help to clean this out, and they're working on that right now.
Mm-hmm. So what do you know about as a place where there have been important meetings recently,
Yeah.
or that there have been missions? US to be a fulcrum, and I think I know what's happening with Space Command, but I just wanted to kind of like get your opinion first before sharing what I know.
What I think, and from what I've been told, is that, as I said before, is that some of that's been infiltrated and it's being cleaned up. And when you think it's cleaned up, again, you know, the cabal and this other stuff, it kind of resurrects itself, and then it gets cleaned up again. So it's a process of back and forth. And so the White Hats and the Earth Alliance and that group are working to put an end to this tyranny program that we've had going on for thousands and thousands of years, back to the fallen Anunnaki. which were actually the ancient Lyrians, were the fallen Anunnaki. So, but they're also benevolent Anunnaki that and Lyrians that actually advanced and continued to evolve, and they're in the sixth dimension and fifth dimension, mostly in the sixth, and they're returning as well because they kind of have a karmic thing to deal with. And so you've got that group, and they were some of the first fallen ones, and then you have Atlantis and Lemuria, and that fell. And those were Palladian colonies, so they have kind of some karma around that. And so they're all coming in to kind of straighten this mess out, and clean up the ones that actually infiltrated and created the fall. So that's the big picture, and I don't know all the details on what's happening on the physical. That's not really my forte. But I do have some high connections. And again, there in the political arena too, there was kind of a pact or an alliance set up, and with major powers, and it was all ready to go, and then that got infiltrated again too. And so that kind of fell apart, especially when Trump lost. And he didn't lose, actually, when they installed Biden. And so that got set back. That was a major setback. And so that's getting ready to flip again. But the thing about this consciousness of tyranny, it's not frequency specific to the earth and where it's going, because we are ascending, we are moving up in frequency. And so whatever they try, it doesn't matter. They're just postponing things and creating more karma for themselves. They can't stop what's happening. And that's when I see the big picture, it gives me solace. I can relax, because if you focus on all the little stuff happening and the chaos and everything, you're gonna lose hope, and lose faith, and you're gonna have a rough time down here.
Mm-hmm. So this process, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, where there seem to be some major victories, maybe some important grey or reptilian beings are captured or forced out. But then there's a step back, because you have others kind of rising up to fill that vacuum. Is that essentially what we're seeing, that every time the top leadership is removed from these negative alliances, that people underneath them or their minions just kind of rise up out of the shadows to take up those positions of authority and use whatever power they have to just kind of keep the whole dark agenda going?
Yeah, you can see that over and over. They throw one tyrant out, and another guy comes in and he says all the right things, and then he goes back to the same agenda. And that's happening. But now when the people rise, and that's what's happening globally, the people are awakening, and they can't stop that. And that's a soul awakening that's happening. That there's a fail-safe system in the soul. When it gets too dark, it triggers it. And that's what happened. People are awakening from within, and they can't control that. And the people are rising up. And was it Kazakhstan? What happened there is not what we're being told. They're saying they're rioting over gas shortages and prices. No, they're rioting against the and the card and all that other stuff. And they actually kicked everybody out, and they're arresting any of the officers, and the military are being arrested that actually fired on the people, or were going against basically universal law or their constitution, whatever. they're gone. The presidents are gone. Their sons, they're gone. They fled. And top people in the military, have turned over, and so the military is with the people now. And that's kind of a blueprint of what we're going to see across the planet. We're going to see that same thing happen across the planet. So a lot of countries, Italy and it's kind of funny because I'm really surprised in America. You'd think we'd be the first ones to do it, but but France and Italy and all these other countries are rising up and just saying no. Other smaller countries. So you can't stop this revolution. It's an evolution, basically, is what it is. You can't stop it.
Yeah, very interesting, because I know I watched some videos from the Arlington Institute, John Peterson, where he interviewed some people, and you mentioned Cliff High, and talking about these future projections, and Cliff High is interesting because he kind of looks at trends in the World Wide Web, and and the prediction was that around 2024 there'll be a global revolution, will be just worldwide. People will rise up and just sweep away the leaders, and this is something that they see. All the global trends are pointing to it. So if the ETs are also looking at those energies, how does that play out? Empower the positive ETs. They can say, oh, well, humanity clearly want their freedom, so the mandate to come in and help some more ones say, well, we've got to stop this, and they pull out all their final cards to stop it. So can you speculate about what do you think's going on as we global revolution?
Well, it's like, although the negative ETs can do that too, they can get into these other people and run this negative agenda. The higher ETs are waking up 1,000 people around them, to realize who they are. So, and the energy is towards the awakening. And so that's continuous right now. That's coming in just so strong. And basically, this is what shocked me. I said, well, are we going to have a two-party system? And they said no. And I went, what? I go, and I was trying to figure out, okay, who's going to win? Are the Republicans going to come back in and take over? If they do, it's temporary. And they said, no, eventually you won't have a two-party system. You're going to have a unified planet, and they're going to be aligned with councils, with higher councils, and it's all going to be done under universal law, and everything is going to be done in service, to the highest and best good of the people. And that's how they operate. With our programs now, it's like whoever has the most money, can pay the right people and has the best PR, and gets into office. And in their systems, whoever is the most adept spiritually and has a long track record of being in service to people are the ones that get elected. So it's a whole different system. It's a completely different system, and that's what we're moving into, where we're going to have more people that are more spiritually adept, that operate under universal law, and that are here to operate in the highest and best good, and they're not in self-service, they're in service to others. And And that's how you can tell who's who. The people that are in self-service are the ones that are aligned with the dark arts, and the people that are in service to others. That's just one way of indicating, uh, who they're working with.
So as we move into that more of that non-two-party system that's going to be global, uh, which councils are we talking about? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about the Andromeda Council, the Council of Nine, the Council of Five.
Yeah.
So, yeah, what councils do you know of, and how are they kind of like interacting with us at the moment?
Well, it's like the Orion Council of Light. They're very involved in planetary liberation because they went through the wars, and they know exactly how we get infiltrated, how all the chaos and division is created, and the different dimensions to that. So they're very involved in that. And the Palladians are also extremely involved, and they have more genetic stock in the earth than any other group. So really, the scepter mainly is being given to the Palladians, and when you meet these beings, you think they're angels. They're very, very beautiful beings, both genetically and energetically. And so they're more involved. The Palladians will have the most involvement, I think, and the Orion Council of Light will be overseeing to make sure this doesn't happen again and take care of all the infiltrations. And they'll be on the lower level. They'll probably be working through the White Hats and the Earth Alliance and things like that. And so it'll be a stair step councils kind of, and the Andromedan councils where the Palladian, the Orion Council of Light, and a lot of the others go to. Syrians, they all go to for the main advice, So, and back in the past, the Palladians went to the Andromedans and they go, God, these beings they're 8 to 10 foot tall light beings. They live in a holographic universe. They're just so advanced and beautiful. They said, will you lead us? And they said, no. They said, what do you mean? They said, no, you need to lead yourselves. We'll advise. And we'll advise, but you need to gain wisdom from your experience. You need to evolve and learn and lead yourselves. And so that's really what we need. We need advisors. We need people from a very high level of consciousness and energy to help in this transition. And I've always said what we really need on this planet is a council of grandmothers, because grandmothers don't send their kids to war. They don't. They love their gardens. They're nurturing. They take care of things, and that's more of the energy. And the Pleiadian energy is more feminine. It's more of a matriarchal society, and that's really kind of where we need to go and get rid of all this other competition and chaos and separation, division games being played here.
So right now, I mean, what would you recommend people to do in terms of them being able to move forward in this climate with all of these conflicting energies? Well, what is the person? What should they do?
The best advice I could give is people need to make their own personal connection with, God, Creator, Great Spirit, whatever name they want to make it. Get out in nature, meditate, make your own connection, and that connection comes through the heart. And your soul actually sits next to the heart. And your soul has your soul body is so vast, it remembers everything you've ever done or been. and actually that is connected to creator. So that is how you connect, and you should be being guided through the heart, not the intellect. And the heart will tell you what's really happening, and the intellect is more the doer. Okay, this is how we get it done, here on the earth. And same with masculine and feminine. The feminine receives the energy and what the guidance and things like that, and the masculine side makes it happen, and we're both masculine and feminine within us. So it's about balance between the two. And so find balance, make your own personal connection come through the heart, and discern from the heart what's right for you, because you're going to be pulled in 1,000 different directions by different groups saying this is the way, and you're the way. Your own personal unique soul purpose is the way, and we need to find out what that is. And it always acts in the highest and best good of humanity. It always acts in service.
Okay, so for people that have been getting a lot of information about places being liberated, like the moon being liberated, and the moon is now being converted over for use to the White Hats, the Earth Alliance.
Yes.
I mean, is that really happening? I mean, as far as I can tell,
Yeah, no, that has
there's been a real shift in terms of the way the moon is being managed. I mean, for the first time, humans are going to take over the moon. We're moving to the moon. I mean, the moon's always been controlled by, whether you call them black hats or the Dark Fleet. They've controlled it for decades, but now, and they stopped the space programs or NASA in 72 from returning to the moon, because that was really the cover for the Navy setting up space bases on the moon, because the Polar program was always a cover. But now what I see happening is that the Artemis Accords are a cover for the moon being taken over by this alliance of positive militaries. They call it the Combined Space Operations. US Space Command is coordinating all the major militaries, apart from China and Russia, who are still on the outer, but they're coordinating to move into the moon in a big way, and they're already taking it over. So, yeah, I mean, is that something that means that these changes are inevitable? They can't be, or is this and two forward, one step back?
Yeah, it's inevitable. A lot of it's already happened. The Mars has been reclaimed, and the people there have to work their stuff out, because you've got different civilizations there and different races there, and look how we're doing on Earth. With just we've got what, white, black, red, yellow, brown. They've got reptile, insect, every color you can imagine, and so they're working their stuff out. They're probably ahead of us, but that's getting worked out. Other places that have been freed from this cabal, this dark fleet, they're going through total reformation, and changes and things like that, and so it's a work in process, but overall, now we're going to start taking like 10 steps forward, very soon. Things are going to move really fast, and that's what I see coming up. It's like I'm really surprised it lasted up to now. But I think this January, all through January, you're going to see major, major things happen and things being exposed, and people who we thought were one way were actually opposite. And you're going to see white hats were wearing dark hats, and dark hats were wearing white hats, and it's going to be a big shift. But what's underneath this is pushing this up is the higher consciousness and energy and universal law, and everything that doesn't align with it is going to implode on itself, basically.
Yeah, one of the things that really intrigued me about Elena Danan's information was where she talked about the Galactic Federation of Worlds helping the indigenous Martians liberate their planet from the Dark Fleet and from the corporations that ran Mars, because that really intrigued me, because I know I came across, when I started interviewing people, Randy Kramer, Tony Rodriguez, all talked about how they were sent to Mars to fight against indigenous Martians, and these indigenous Martians were insectoids and reptilians, and it was very interesting to kind of hear that people from Earth were being sent there to protect these human colonies set up by the Dark Fleet and by the corporations on Mars against these insectoids and reptilians. And then later on, recently, Lena was saying that the Federation was helping the reptilians and the insectoids free themselves by actually equipping them. So that was amazing to me to kind of hear that, and it jived with the information I had that that humans on Mars are kind of regarded as non-indigenous, and so the Galactic Federation would be following cosmic law and help the indigenous races to free themselves against these human colonists.
Yeah, it is really interesting. It's like the old days, with the cavalry, and everybody's going, "Hey, the cavalry's coming." Well, not necessarily, It's like they may not necessarily be the good guys. What about the guys that have always been there that just want to live a peaceful, harmonious life, and don't want to be intruded upon? So it is the same thing. It's they're operating under universal law and removing, the tyranny and the aggressor. They're removing that, and then helping the other people evolve, and eventually it'll come to terms. It'll come back to peace, and we'll all be working together in harmony. But I think there'll always be some differences and old grudges, that people are holding that'll take time to release, to let go of. And it's funny because Randy Kramer's been here, and I asked him a lot of questions, and my guys were telling me things about Mars, and they said, no, we've had bases on Mars since the 60s. We've been going back and forth, and since the late 60s. And so I asked him that. I said, well, how long have we been going back and forth to Mars, And he said late 60s. And I went, okay, and so I'd always get information, and I'd ask these other people, and I wouldn't tell them, I wanted to hear their story, and then they would tell me what they knew, and I go, God, this is totally lining up, this is with everything else. And so a lot of the information coming out, we always have to cross-check it and look at it and and check our information with other people that have been there and things like that to get the real story. Because as you know, there's so much disinformation and overactive imagination and just so many crazy things in this community that there's a lot of people that want to do the one-upmanship and on somebody else's back, and competition. It's insane, and I know when I did an interview with Art Bell and he asked me about it, he goes, "What is it with the UFO community? They eat the." And I said, we just have to stop this competition. That we need to all tell our truth and our experience and put our information on the table and look for where it unifies, look for things that validate each other and figure it out. Then you have the whole pie. But we do have to realize that there is an extremely controlled narrative in the UFO community. It's like, because we've gone through this snowpocalypse, I've had a lot of time to sit and watch all the UFO things coming out now. And it's the same good old boys club. And they've never had an experience. They've never seen a ship. They've never seen, but they have these same guys every time on there and to validate it. And you're going, we're still at, do they exist? We're still at, do UFOs exist? I said, we already, and the information you're bringing out too is so far over the top that, yeah, they do exist. We've been working with them probably since the 30s in Germany. We've known about them, and we've actually back engineered their technology. We have our own space fleet. We've been interacting with these different races for God knows how long. And why are we still going back to, do they exist? Are they real? Why are they here? We know them by name. We know their cultures. We know their technologies. We have all this information, and I just go, where is it? Where is it? And it's because there's an extremely controlled narrative. And it even goes deeper in that, because they really don't want the higher dimensional information to come out, because the controlled narrative is controlled by a much lower dimension.
So how do you think contact is going to play out? I mean, with all the energies coming in and the contacts you've been having, the information you have been given, do you think we're going to first have this global revolution where the cabal is removed and the people take over governments all over the world and the party systems are abolished? We're going to have that first, and then we're going to have this kind of ET contact, or is it going to happen?
I think it's going to happen simultaneously, and I think contact is going to happen with those who are ready, those who have risen to the occasion, and have cleaned up their own wounds and traumas and are thinking, critically thinking and doing their own research and things like that. Those are the people that are going to be contacted first. A lot of it's going to be done. Contact is already happening in temples and ashrams and things like that around the world. The yogis and the lamas, they know all about what's going on. The Native American elders, they know, because they're living a life, a spiritual life close to earth and things like that. And those are the people that are already being contacted. And some are fully aware of who's contacting them, some are not. They just call it Great Spirit or an angel or whatever else. But That's already happening right now. That's going on. Also, too, with the Orion Council of Light, they're incredible initiators, and like they did with me, they return to me all my memories. So, a lot of us are actually from the Pleiades and from the Orion system and from the Sirian system and things like that. And we've incarnated here, and in this earth human form, but on our soul level we're actually from these other civilizations, and so they're going to be initiated and awakened as to who they really are and why they're here and why they incarnated, which is part of the birth and earth. And so that's happening. So it's on a very spiritual level, through the dream state, through contact with higher dimensional beings, and there's a lot of work being done that people aren't aware of. And these ahas are coming to them, and they go, "Where'd that thought come from?" And it might not have been your thought. And then, but there's the negative thought too that are coming to you that may not have been your thought as well. So it's all about self-mastery, and I think the especially the children coming in right now, they're so active, they're awake, and they're really tapping in, and if you keep them out in nature and keep them open and positive, they're going to be incredible, in the days to come, because they just incarnated from these higher civilizations, and so the memories are closer and thicker and easier to access, and so that's happening. So everybody's waiting for this big ET invasion that happened a long time ago. It's called reincarnation. It's like the higher dimensional beings have already set this up, for these times, and so I think it's going to be more of a spiritual thing. It's going to be more of them showing themselves to people, and they're going, "Wait a second, these are real. If they lied about this, what else have they lied about?" And people are going to realize. And then there's this extreme desire for things like medbed and anti-gravity, counter-gravity, and the fuelless energy technologies, and things to clean up our environment and free ourselves. I mean, that desire as well. And they have all that, and that's going to usher it in. And so as we evolve, that movement towards that higher conscious and energy and service, and bringing in these spiritual earth-friendly technologies is going to increase, and then eventually this tyranny program is going to be a thing of the past. So, we'll be reading about it in history books.
Yeah, well, I know, and when you talk about the Orion Council of Light, I mean, is that the same as the Council of Five? I think Elena talks about the Council of Five as being the remnants, or what's left over of this Orion Council of Nine that used to exist. And so are we talking the same thing, the Orion Council of Light and the Council of Five? Are they pretty much the same body, or separate things?
I think the ones that I'm dealing with are separate. They've been around forever, and the problem is a lot of those councils in the past, the councils of Five and Nines and things like that, were actually is it Buharic and that group, they were attached to alphabet agencies, and their come from was wrong, and so they're bringing in the wrong energies. And so some of these councils were actually tied into darker forces. And so if you say the Council of Five or Nine, it in the past it's been off. And like Orion, people don't realize, people think everything in Orion is bad, everything in Orion is negative. Well, are extremely advanced, beautiful beings that are ancient Lyrians that colonized Orion that went through the wars, and they understand that they're how they operate, and so they're here to help us. So it's tricky when you give something a name. A lot of those names have been convoluted. Like take God. God's almost a dirty word to a lot of people because it's been so misused and abused and things like that. That's why I always say God, Creator, Great Spirit, whatever you want to call it. It's just pure bliss. It's beyond any name or image we can give it. But when we get into all these names and past names and things like that, we need to be careful because some of these groups are not who we think they are. That's the best way I can say it. So I just go by my energetic connection, the amount of love and joy and bliss I feel coming from these beings, and their message. Is it in service? Is it unifying? Is it helping us to evolve and empowering us as an individual? And I use that as my guidelines. And anytime it steps outside of those guidelines, I just switch channels. I said no. And I call in my other friends and say, I have a talk with this person, or this being, and take care of it.
Earlier on, we talked about this global revolution that's coming, and I've been getting some information that it's going to happen this year. And certainly it looks like this year is a year where we're going to have tremendous awakening, and we're already seeing people revolting all over the planet over the policies that are being implemented. So, could this year be the year?
Oh, yeah. I mean, basically, they call these policies draconian, and they call it draconian for a reason because we've been under draconian law for, 450,000 years, basically. And it goes back to when Marduk made a pact with the reptilians for total supremacy, even over his own people. And he warred on his own people with an allegiance with the reptilians and the Greys. And we've been under that mess and been fighting against that for 450,000 years. Well, that's finally it was so infiltrated and it's gone on for so long that finally those are being cleared out, and the people that have aligned with those energies are being cleared out. And so it's creating space for people to rise up and take the power back. And I really do see, I'm really surprised it's lasted as long as it did, because what happens, they brought an eye in, and this guy would tell the people everything they wanted to hear, and then they would totally flip on him. So people kind of step back and go, okay, we got our guy in, now things are going to change, and then they didn't. And so that's been happening globally, and now the people are saying, look, we don't even need this system at all anymore. It's the power's being condensed, like socialism. You take the power and you put it in the hands of a few, and the power and the wealth, and then eventually, you offer a bunch of free bennies and things like that. But when that money runs out, basically you're not going to, the few are not going to spend their money, to keep things going. And so there's a revolution, and people get angry, and then they take away their guns and their right to defend themselves, and then you have genocide. And that's been going on for God knows how long. And that's what these guys are trying to do. They're trying to create a system where these narcissistic billionaires, eugenicists, are going to control everything, and they're going to consolidate all the power and the wealth into the hands of the few, and they're going to divide everybody in culture, in race, and religion, and gender, and create all this division, and then it's ordered through chaos. You know, they're creating all this chaos, and then say, we have the solution, we're going to bring order. And everybody gives their power away, and they said, yeah, okay, we're going to give you free this, free this, free this, free this. Well, where's it going to come from, you know? Not coming from them, it comes from the people. So it's that same kind of mindset that we're going through right now. In a republic, you know, everybody is king, and the power rests in the people. And in major civilizations, like extremely advanced civilizations, the power rests in the people, and they operate under universal law. And their leadership are more like councils or guides, and they kind of oversee the bigger picture. You know, a good example I really want to talk about in ancient history, the Orion system. There was an Orion council there, and that council got infiltrated by the dark side, and the wise ones there said, hey, we need to gear up. There's something coming. There's a dark force coming. We need to gear up. We need to outfit our ships to defend the planet, and we need to be on the ready. And they went to the council and told them this, but the council got infiltrated, and so they said, no, we are going to take a spiritual approach. You know, we're not going to gear up. We're going to, you know, if we become a threat, then they're going to come after us, and if we're not a threat, they're going to leave us alone. And they started using all these mind control tactics, and so they didn't gear up. But enough people listened to the wise ones and did gear up enough to beat off these other forces. But it was really traumatizing to the civilization, because they lost a lot of their cities and things like that in the conflict. But they were the Orion ships were much more advanced, you know, than the reptilian and the gray ships. They just weren't armed, and so when they did beat them back, and so, interesting enough, you can see that same scenario being played out on the earth right now with the leadership. The leadership has been infiltrated on a huge level, and they're playing these same games, and the other people going, hey, we see what's going on here, we need to rise up. And they're saying, no, we need to just all, don't worry about it, we'll take care of everything. You know, and they're letting, you know, that old saying, you know, evil persists when people do nothing, or live in denial and don't recognize it. Or the other stuff came out of Buhari's stuff, and the turkey farm was a lot of the New Age teachings, where if you see evil, it's in you, and so don't look at it, you know, and things like that. So it exists, you know. Everybody says, well, that's, if you see evil, that's the evil in you. And I said, look, if I die and leave this plane, evil's still going to be here, you know, and it has its own force, you might say. And so we have to realize that it doesn't matter. It is a force, you know, and we need to deal with it, and we need to get back to universal law, and things that don't fit within universal law we need to deal with. And so,
Yeah, yeah, that seems to me to be kind of like a really a very passive philosophy. If you just go through life thinking, well, whatever evil I see out there is evil, that's a mirror of me, so I've got to work within. And it's like, well, that may have a truth to it, but of course, that doesn't negate the fact that that evil is very real and it's out there, and that what you recognize within you is something that gives you an empathic connection, but you still have to take action. You still have to
yeah, exactly.
do what needs to be done, and follow your path, and do take those actions. So, what lies ahead for you now? I mean, I know it's coming up. Well, it's still a few months away.
Yeah,
You're kind of locked in under what, a couple of feet of snow there.
about five
So,
or 6 feet of snow
so
right
what's
now.
going on with you now?
Lately, I just been using. I've been my butt's been glued to the tractor, and I've been shoveling snow. But a lot of things coming up. Some things we kind of have to keep under the wraps before we unload them. But a lot of new networks coming up. Where we'll be working with people in different places and things like that. But we're going to be ongoing as usual. We'll be having the conferences here and the workshops and the classes and the sky watches and things like that on a regular basis. And if people just stay in contact through the newsletter or through the website, they'll see a lot of things that are coming up. We're launching E-City Stargate TV, and where we get a lot of information out, and so we're very discerning on who we allow to bring their information out on our site. So so basically, we're working on a lot of self-mastery courses, like also ambassador training courses, where we actually empower people to discern who they're working with, how to heal, how to clear these energies, things like that. So we'll launch that really soon on our website as to the courses and things. And I always tell people, don't take my word for it. Come and see for yourself, because the ships come every night here. If it's a clear night, you're going to see ships, and sometimes they're treetop level, and sometimes they're up higher. But the energetic exchange with these ships is off the scale. And also the mountain too. I wanted to cover that. I didn't get into that, but we've had a lot of remote viewers, John Kelly, a lot of other people have come up here and validated what I've said all along that's going on in the mountain. But the mountain, the energies, you can actually measure them with PIP technology or Harold Oldfield technology. The energy coming off that mountain is stronger than the pyramids. It's a massive energy coming up from that mountain, and it's like a galactic airport, and then it has an extreme energy technology, and then it has the inner earth connection and doors to the inner earth there. So it's all going on up here. It's not just one thing. And I always tell people in the UFO community, there's a lot of argument because people are saying it's all good, it's all bad, it's all negative, it's all German, it's all, it's time travel, it's this and that. And I tell people it's all the above. It's not just one thing, and it's all going on. But the good news is the low-level stuff is having to rise because of their contact with the higher levels in energy, conscious energy. So And I know you had a guy, you just had a guy, a soldier on your show. I actually listened to that show where he said there's some ships that they found in Antarctica and I think one on the moon. And where was the third one? Was it Mars? I don't
Uh, Ganymede well, they're finding them throughout the solar system, that these
Yeah,
are kind of motherships or arcs, really.
yeah,
And this
yeah,
guy, JP, he's very interesting because I've been working with him since 2008. And he was telling me back in 2014 and 15 that he was being taken into these huge arcs, and he saw, like, the massive structures like hemispheres, and he was told that these were all there, to kind of like continue the species or to repopulate the planet or whatever the emergency was. These huge arcs existed, so he was being taken to them. So yeah,
yeah,
this guy JP is now in the army, and the army's got him going to these arcs to provide escort duties to
yeah,
people. And I know they're doing it because he's got the energy signature, the frequency to get permission to go into these things.
yeah, yeah, because they're sentient and they're very high frequency, very high energy arcs, and they're actually, the ancient Lyrians are involved in that, and their ships came in and actually activated them, and they're a gift. And they're opening a door, and our curiosity, we're going to walk through that door, and it's going to create a quantum leap in consciousness and technology here. It can't be used negatively. There's safeguards built into that. But I was talking to the ancient Lyrians about that, and they said, yeah, that's some of our old technology. To us, it's like magic, but to them, it's not, and they said a lot of those are a gift, and they came and activated them so we can, go to the next level. And I know some of the writing, they're trying to decipher it, and some of that same writing is actually at Gosford Glyphs, and they have the petroglyphs, and they have the hieroglyphs, and then they have star glyphs above that. And the star glyphs are the ones that are the ancient Lyrians, and the Palladians. Those are their glyphs, and if they understand that, those glyphs, they'll understand, the writings that they're finding there, and things like that. So it's a very rich language, you might say. It's not just a word, that there's a whole meaning in each one of those glyphs, but that's information they were giving me, and in the Gosford glyphs, it tells the whole history of Earth. It said that these ships came, colonized the Earth. There's a lot of genetic upgrading going on. Those are the ancient Lyrians. And then they had the cataclysms. They had to start over, and then the Palladians came in and started. The ancestors of the Lyrians came in and started Atlantis and Lemuria. And there was a lot of terraforming. They brought all kinds of animals and plants and things, and then they had the pole shift and had to start over, and then now we're at it again. So that some of the civilizations that were here were their technology would seem like magic, and this was like 450,000 years ago. So. it's hard for us to wrap our head around how old this universe is, and the beings that have been here. And you know, to me, when you're that advanced, you know, you're not going to come down and walk on the earth. You know, you're going to wait for Earth to rise to the occasion. It's not safe. You know, so they're waiting for us to rise to the occasion, and they're helping us along the way.
Yep, definitely. Well, that's a good way to finish the show. So I want to thank you, James, for coming on the show, and everyone just visit James's website, iseti.org, and you can get more information about upcoming events and courses and programs he has up there. So thank you, James.
For having me on the show, and give